Hello, everyone, and welcome to Chapter 8. Chapter 8 looks at marketing research. Okay, so in Chapter 8, we look at the definition of marketing research. We look at three different types of marketing research: exploratory, descriptive, and causal. Then we look at four stages in the marketing research process. So the first stage is defining the marketing problem. The second stage is designing the research approach. The third stage is actually collecting the data and analyzing it. And the fourth stage is drawing conclusions and writing a report. And the way the chapter is designed is once we get down to this step here regarding the stages in the marketing research process, the rest of the chapter is really just going through these four stages. And so when we're collecting data, we can make use of either so-called secondary data, or we can collect primary data. And primary data, we might collect primary data from surveys, through experiments, or through observational methods of research. And then at the end, we look at how some automated marketing information systems can lead to information that causes us to take decisions and take marketing actions. Okay, so off we go to Chapter 8. So the first part of Chapter 8 looks at marketing research using information coming from social media. And I'm not going to look at this section in class here, but towards the end of the chapter, I have posted some videos in Moodle that will give you a sense of how some of the technology that gets used in marketing research based on information from social media. So we'll come back to this. I'll come back to this topic at the end of this chapter, because it's a relatively recent development in marketing research. Okay. So what is marketing research? So you'll recall way back in Chapter 1, way back at the beginning of the course, we said that the first objective of marketing is discovering consumer needs, or discovering buyer needs. And if that's what the first goal we need to accomplish in marketing, then we can see that marketing research is important, because marketing research is going to help us understand what the needs of consumers are. And so marketing research, the definition is a three-part process that firstly defines the marketing problem and opportunity, so it helps us assess consumer needs and wants. Secondly, the second step of the marketing research process is the systematic collection and analysis of information. And then the third part of the marketing research is drawing conclusions and recommending actions that we can use in our marketing activities. Oops. Okay, so we have three types of marketing research that are classified by function, or we might say purpose. So firstly, we can have exploratory research, and exploratory research helps us investigate and understand the nature of the problem that we want to address. So it helps us provide or obtain a better understanding of the problem, and it's undertaken with the expectation that we'll use additional forms of research later on. So an example of exploratory research from the book is the Canadian Dairy Farmer Association conducting research into the causes of declining milk consumption. Okay, so the second type of marketing research we can undertake is called descriptive research, and descriptive research describes features of a given population or marketing situation. So, for example, it can describe the size of a market or the characteristics of a market. It can describe product usage patterns, or it might describe consumer attitudes towards particular brands. And then the third form of research is a causal research that explores for or identifies causal relationships between cause and effect, or between independent variable and a dependent variable. So, for example, we might try to measure the effect on demand from a change in price, or we want to measure the effect on sales from a new advertising campaign. So an example of a descriptive research from the book, again back to our Canadian Dairy Farmer Association example. They discovered, as part of their descriptive research, they discovered that people thought milk was fattening and high in cholesterol. And then at the causal research stage, the Canadian Dairy Farmer Association put out some new ads that emphasized the health aspects of milk, or the healthy aspects of milk, and they discovered that that resulted in an increase in milk consumption. So the new advertising campaign was the independent variable, it was the cause, and the effect was the increase in sales. Okay, so off we go to the marketing research process. So good marketing research is based on a scientific approach, which means that it's based on observed data, and it's based on the unbiased collection and analysis of observed data. And so we have two criteria to determine whether or not our method is scientific or not. One is the method is reliable. And reliable means it's repeatable. So it means if we undertake our research today, then someone else is able to repeat or replicate our results under the same environmental conditions at a different time. And so the research is repeatable. And then the data that we collect is valid, and valid means accurate. So when we collect the data, it accurately describes what it is we're trying to describe. Okay. So we have four steps in the marketing research process. So the first step in the process is defining the problem, or defining the issue that we're interested in. And the second step is designing our approach for undertaking our research. And then we actually go out and collect the data, and then we analyze it. That's the third step. And then the fourth step, we draw our conclusions from the data, and we write a report for our client, or for our supervisor, or whoever it is that got us to undertake the research in the first place. So when we're at the problem definition stage, we can, as we mentioned before, we can undertake some exploratory research, and at this stage we can use either secondary data, we'll come back to that in just a minute, or we can use primary data, and we might collect primary data from focus groups or these depth interviews. And then when we design our formal approach to the research, we'll be looking for some primary data, and three techniques we can use are surveys, experiments, or observations, and we'll have a sampling plan that we use when we go out and actually collect the data. Okay, so the rest of the chapter really just walks through these four steps. So that's what we're going to do. Oh, oops, something went backwards there. Okay, so the first step in the marketing research process is defining the problem. And when we speak of the problem, what we mean is the issue or the topic of interest to us. As the book mentions, the word problem does not mean something has gone wrong. It's just the topic that we're interested in. And so we can intuitively understand that it's important for us to have a clearly defined problem, a clearly defined issue, in order to focus our research and to focus our data collection. So at the problem definition stage, we might use exploratory research to help clarify what the issue is, or clarify the boundaries of the issue. And we might use secondary data in this process, or we might also use primary data. So secondary data is data that already exists. It's pre-existing data that was collected at an earlier time. So an obvious advantage of using secondary data is the fact that it usually exists, and if it already exists, then it's probably cheaper to get our hands on than if we're relying upon primary data. The drawback of using secondary data is it might not exist, and secondly, if it does exist, it might not directly address the topic that we're interested in. It might not directly address our problem. Anyways, if we're going to be using secondary data, there's a long list of potential sources of secondary data. We might have some sources of statistical information. So, for example, we might look at some stats collected from Statistics Canada, or the Conference Board of Canada, or some publications might have some demographic information about different markets across the country. Or there might be some academic journals out there, Journal of Advertising, Journal of Marketing, Journal of Retailing, that might have some articles about the issue that we're interested in. Or there might be some business or trade magazines that have articles that address our topic. So American magazines, Business Week, or Canadian magazines like Canadian Business, Profit Magazine, Forbes, Fortune, the publications, Globe and Mail, Report on Business, or Financial Post. They might have published some articles that are of interest to us, or there might be some other private sources of information. There's any number of companies whose job it is to go out and collect information about various markets, and then they sell that information to clients. So you have professional research companies that go out and compile reports, and then they go and sell them. That's their business. Okay, so we have many potential sources of secondary information that we might use at the exploratory research stage, but we also might collect some primary data at the exploratory research stage. And if we collect the primary data, so primary data is information that does not pre-exist. So it's originally generated data from some of our own research. And we might collect that data from using focus groups or depth interviews. So a focus group is a small group of people with a market researcher or a moderator that discusses the marketing problem. And these focus groups, they can be conducted either face-to-face or online. And it's a good way to obtain qualitative information about the marketing issue or the marketing problem. And then another approach to generating primary data from during the exploratory research stage is through the use of depth interviews. So instead of having a group of interviewees, you have the interviewer and simply one interviewee that the interviewer kind of probes with questions. And again, depth interviews are used to help understand what the marketing issue or the marketing problem is. Okay, so the second stage of the marketing research process is as designing the approach we're going to use in the research. Just a second here. So it's deciding the approach we're going to use for collecting the data that we're going to use to help solve our issue or solve our problem. So research design is designing the plan and the methods of collecting the data. And we have multiple steps in the research plan stage. We need to specify what our objectives of the research are. We need to identify information or data sources. We need to select our research methods, so whether we're going to use surveys, or we're going to use experiments or observation techniques. We need to determine what our sampling plan is going to be, and we'll come back to that later. We need to determine what our time schedule is going to be, and we need to make an estimate of our costs of the exercise, or we have to come up with our budget. So we have these three research methods. We have surveys, we have experiments, and we have observation. So we're going to walk through each of these three research techniques. Oops. Oh, so okay. So the first one is the survey technique. So survey is asking people questions and recording their answers on a questionnaire. And we have various survey methods. We can undertake personal interviews, or also known as face-to-face interviews. We can undertake our surveys through phone, through mail, or online. And the book has a little bit of a chart here which compares the advantages and disadvantages of these different survey techniques. So we're going to use personal interview as kind of our base here as our reference point. So we can undertake personal interviews, or face-to-face interviews. So an obvious face-to-face, right? F to F. An obvious advantage of using face-to-face interviews is that the interviewer has the opportunity to ask clarifying and probing questions. So if the interviewer thinks that the interviewee has not understood the question correctly, then the interviewer can kind of ask the question in a slightly different way so that the desired question gets posed. An obvious disadvantage of personal interviews is going to be expensive. You're going to have surveyors going door to door, spending lots of time with individual people. It's going to be expensive. Okay, so we can if we move to a mail survey, we know intuitively that an advantage of mail surveys is they're not going to be very expensive. They're going to be a whole lot less expensive than face-to-face interviews. But a drawback of mail surveys is that respondees tend to have either a strongly positive or negative experience with the product, and since they're the people that are most likely to respond to the survey question, the views of those people might not be representative of the typical consumer, and so the results might be biased. So another survey technique is conducting a survey over the phone, so we can see that intuitively they're going to be less expensive than face-to-face because you don't have to go door to door, you just dial up numbers. A drawback of telephone surveys that maybe some of us have contributed to is the poor response due to hang-ups. Many people don't like participating in surveys, especially at home, on the phone, because you're doing something else and this survey kind of interrupts you, so you just hang up on the person, and so the response rate isn't particularly high. So another approach to surveys is conducting them online. So an obvious advantage is they're going to be inexpensive. An advantage is they're going to be a quick response time. Drawback is people just are going to ignore them. So another method mentioned in the book is the mall intercept survey. So this is where the surveyor goes to a shopping mall and flags people down as they're walking by, and then asks the person questions from the questionnaire. So a mall intercept survey is going to be less expensive than personal interviews, but a drawback is the people that go shopping in shopping malls are not necessarily representative of the entire population, and it may be that the results from mall intercept surveys are not reflective of the experience for the whole population. And then there's another form of survey the book mentions called a survey panel. So it's where the market researcher surveys the same customer or the same store or the same experts over a period of time, just to monitor any difference in the views of that person as time passes. Okay, so so if a surveyor is going to use, if we're using this survey method of research, and the researcher is using a survey, then it's assumed that the questionnaire contains the right questions. And the survey method also assumes that the people that we're surveying understand the questions that we're posing to them, and that they know the answers to the questions, and that they answer the questions truthfully. And then finally, this method presumes that the researchers understand and interpret the answers correctly. But we know, and obviously market researchers have encountered some of these problems in the past, and that's why the authors are bringing it to our attention. But we can see that this is a potential flaw in the survey method of research. If people don't answer our survey questions truthfully, then the inferences we draw at the end of the day when we're analyzing our data and we're drawing conclusions, we might lead ourselves astray just because our surveyees or interviewees haven't been truthful with us. And then another potential problem with survey questions is if we have some poorly worded questions, then the data we collect might not be particularly meaningful. And so the book gives us a list of some survey question wording problems. One is the so-called leading question. So a leading question is the question is designed to elicit a particular answer from the interviewee. And so the stereotypical good example of a leading question is it's a question that gets posed to a guy, and the question is, when did you stop beating your wife? And that's a leading question because it presumes that the person is was a wife beater. So either the answer is, I've already stopped, which implies that he's acknowledging that he was a wife beater, or if the answer is, well, I haven't stopped, it kind of also implies that, geez, he's still a wife beater. Anyways, that's an example of a leading question. Sometimes we can have ambiguous questions because they use vaguely defined terms. So the example from the book is, do you eat at fast food restaurants regularly? It's a hard question to answer because we don't know what the word regularly is intended to mean. Does it mean every day, every month, every week, every year? What does regularly mean? Okay, and then sometimes questions can be poorly worded, and we have an unanswerable question, or it's a question that is irrelevant. So, what was the occasion for your eating your first hamburger? Well, it's like many types of foods. We don't remember the first time we ever had a particular food, and we don't even know what the relevance of that question is. Sometimes we can have questions that are really multiple questions and rolled into one. So do you eat Wendy's hamburgers and chili? So what is it asking? Do we eat Wendy's hamburgers? Do we eat Wendy's chili? or do we eat Wendy's hamburgers and chili at the same time? So we have multiple questions kind of rolled into the into one apparent question. Okay, another question wording problem is questions that have non-exhaustive answers. So where do you live? Do you live at home? Do you live in a dormitory? Well, what if you live at your grandmother's house? Well, that's not home. It's not in a dormitory, or live in an apartment or a condo. Anyways, there are more possible answers than the ones provided. And then they can have questions that have non-mutually exclusive answers. So what's your age? Under 20, 20 to 40, or 40 and over. So if you're 40 years old, are you in the second box here, 20 to 40, or are you 40 and over? I mean, obviously it should say 41 and over, or something like that. Okay, so the next little section gives us some examples of different types of questions that we can use in surveys. Oops, going the wrong way, sorry. Okay, so we have 4 different types of questions illustrated in this Wendy survey. So the first type of question is known as an open-ended question. And an open-ended question is a question where the respondee can use his or her own words to answer the question. So what things are most important to you when you decide to eat out and go to a fast food restaurant? So you can talk about the location, you can talk about the brand, you can talk about the cost. You can put the answer in your own word. So that's first type of question, open-ended. Second type of question is called a closed-ended question, closed-ended, or a dichotomous. I'll have to get the spelling from the book, where you have a choice between 2 different types of answers. So question number 2 here is an example of a closed-ended question. So have you eaten at a fast food restaurant in the past month? Yes or no? True or false? Yes or no? That's a dichotomous question. The third type of question that we can find in surveys is known as a fixed alternative type question, and it's illustrated by question number 5 here. So a fixed alternative type question is where there's a 3 or more fixed answer choices provided along a scale. So for example, for each of the following characteristics listed below, check the space on the scale that describes how you feel about Wendy's. So regarding the taste of Wendy's food, do we find it tasty or not so tasty? So regarding the cleanliness of the restaurants, are they clean? Are they dirty? It's in between. Price, inexpensive, expensive. So we can kind of place our answer along the scale. The fourth type of question that we can find in these questionnaires is known as a Likert question. And there's an, oops. So question number 6 here is an example, question type number 4, a Likert. A Likert question asks for the degree of agreement or disagreement with a provided description. So Likert question number 6. So check one box that describes your agreement or disagreement with each statement below. So statement: adults like to take families to fast food restaurants. Do we strongly agree? Do we agree? Don't know. Do we disagree, or do we strongly disagree? I don't know. Anyways, we've seen these types of questions on surveys that have been inflicted upon us. Okay, so the second method of research is after surveys. The second method of research is the experimental method, and the experimental method is often used to determine causal relationships. So we're trying to determine a relationship between a cause and an effect, otherwise known as an independent variable and a dependent variable. And so in marketing experiments, often one of the or the independent variable is often one of the marketing mix variables. So the marketing mix variables are the so-called 4 P's of marketing: product, price, place, and promotion. So that's our dependent variable. Sorry, that's our independent variable, and then usually the dependent variable is usually change in quantity purchased. So experiments, marketing experiments can either be conducted in the field or in laboratories. And field experiments is when the marketer takes their product out into a real life situation, and they see what the response of customers is to the product. And there's a good example of a field experiment in the book regarding Walmart. When they first had their Supercenter store concept, they built several of these full-size Supercenter stores in certain locations to see how people would respond to them. And because the market was favorably responsive to them, then they went out and rolled out their Supercenter store format in a larger geographical area. A drawback of field experiments is that the marketer doesn't control all the variables because you're dealing with a real life situation, and it may be that competitors will start changing their behavior while your experiment is underway, and then it skews the results of your survey. And so sometimes marketers use labs for conducting experiments where they can control more of the variables. So I have a good example of an experiment. For those students who have watched the Lucky Ironfish video from a few weeks back, you recall the doctor was trying to find a way to persuade the Cambodian families to put this piece of iron in their cooking pots. And first he tried a piece of iron that looked like a bar of soap, a square or rectangular bar, and there was very little uptake on using a piece of metal like that in your cooking pots. And then, so the fellow then changed the shape of the iron bar into this fish shape, and we know that that fish was a good luck symbol in Cambodia, and people started to use the iron bar in that particular shape in their cooking pots. So that fellow really conducted an experiment. He changed one of the product features. He changed the shape of the iron bar, and he tried to determine the effect on the market's acceptance of the product, and he found that people were receptive to this newly shaped piece of iron. So really, that was an experiment. It was a doctor that conducted that experiment, and actually, that doctor, he's a Canadian fellow, believe it or not. You might believe it because you probably notice he has a Canadian accent. Okay, then the third method of research is the observational approach. And so the observation approach is what it kind of implies is that we watch people how they behave. And we can watch how people behave either by physically watching them in person, or we can use some kind of mechanical or electronic means for watching their behavior. So when we talk about watching people in person, that's known as ethnographic research. There's no slide for this, so I can't change. Anyways, it's known as ethnographic research. So there's a couple of examples of ethnographic research in the book. Office Max, the office supply store, watched people buying certain products together or at the same time, and then they decided to move those products closer together to make it more convenient for the shoppers. And then another example of ethnographic research from the book is the Moen showerhead company. When they're looking to redesign their showerhead, they observed people actually taking showers, and I guess to see how they moved around in the shower in response to the showerhead. So that was ethnographic research, actually observing people. Another kind of another form of in-person observation is the use of the so-called mystery shoppers. So this is where the researchers disguise themselves as customers in order to obtain information about the customer experience. And then we have any number of mechanical methods of observational research. One that we sometimes see in stores are these motion detectors that count traffic. They count traffic going in and out of the doors. We see the traffic counters on the highways sometimes when the government wants to know whether or not they should expand the size of a highway. They'll have those traffic counters down. So sometimes stores use cameras in their stores, and a couple examples from the book. Procter & Gamble used cameras to watch women doing household chores with Procter & Gamble products. Procter & Gamble makes Tide soap, for example. So another example from the book of a mechanical method of observation is Gillette using cameras to watch how people brush their teeth when Gillette was wanting to redesign their toothbrushes. And then I have a video that I posted in Moodle that you might be interested in watching. It's about eye monitoring. So it's marketers putting these special glasses on people, or sometimes they put special cameras on computers to watch where people's eyes move when they're shopping. So this video is from an American marketing professor. And then another mechanical means of observation, which is a relatively new one, but it's an interesting one that the book mentions. It's called neural marketing. And neural marketing is the use of machines that monitor our brain activity when we see certain advertisements. And so it's a form of research looking into how the most effective design of advertisements. So I've posted this video also in Moodle called "Is There a Buy Button Inside the Brain?" And it's really about neural marketing. So it's quite interesting. I think it's quite interesting. So you might be interested in taking a look at that. Okay, so let's just go back. Oops. Oh, okay, so this is Walmart using a full-size store as part of their experiment, and this is Gillette using cameras to watch how people brush their teeth when they're redesigning their toothbrush. Okay, so the book, we're coming to the end of the research design stage of the market research process. The book asks the question, is there an optimal design for marketing research? And the answer is no, because you need to select the method that best suits the particular problem or the particular issue that you have in mind, and the best method might also depend on the experience of the particular researcher that's conducting the research. So a final feature in the research design stage is concerns the sample of data that we're going to collect. So when you speak about a sampling, we mean gathering data from a portion of the total population rather than the entire population. And then we draw conclusions based on the sample about the characteristics of the whole. And the reason we collect data from a sample of the population, or a portion of the population rather than the entire population, is because it's often too expensive to sample the entire population. So, sometimes we hear these political polls on the news. The political survey companies, they don't survey every single Canadian. They just survey a couple thousand Canadians, and then they draw conclusions about how Canadians as a whole feel about a particular political issue or political candidate. And the reason they take samples is because it's too expensive to survey all 35 million Canadians. So it's too expensive or it's too impractical. So when you're designing your research, you need to have a sampling plan. So you need to determine who is going to be sampled, and you need to determine how large your sample is going to be, because usually the bigger the sample, the more accurate the data, but then the more accurate, it's going to be more costly than a smaller sample. And you need to determine the method of selecting the sample from the group. So if we use so-called probability sampling, it means that we know that the likelihood of selecting a particular person. We know in advance what the likelihood is of selecting a particular person. And when we use probability sampling, our results are probably going to best represent the views of the total population. But if we use non-probability sampling, we don't know what the likelihood of a particular person is in getting selected. And so our results, our selection of samples from the population may be biased, and so the results that we get at the end of our survey might not be as accurate as we would get from using probability sampling. But an advantage of using non-probability sampling is that it's cheaper and faster and easier to do, rather than trying to find a representative sample in the whole population. Okay, so the next little section moves on to the third step of the marketing research process, and that's the actual collection and analysis of data. So by data collection, it's simply going out into the field and collecting the data into our survey or experiment or observation. And as the book mentions, the data collection stage is a large source of error in the marketing research process, because either we haven't selected the right sample members from our population, or we make errors in recording the observations. So if the people we're surveying do not tell us truthful answers, then obviously we're going to have errors in our results. So we have data collection, and we have data analysis. So data analysis is looking at patterns in the data, and the book mentions a couple of different techniques for finding these patterns. It mentions a frequency analysis. So it's simply going through the data and counting the number of observations for each one of the answers. It also mentions cross-tabulation. So we're trying to find relationships between different variables. So I have an example of a cross-tabulation here, and there's lots of other statistical analysis tools that we're not going to get into. So I have an example of a cross-tabulation here. Just a second. Cross-tabulation. Whoops. Oh, there we go here. Okay, so let's say we took a survey of 100 people, and we tracked their gender, so which ones were male, which ones were female, and we surveyed them regarding whether or not they were right-handed or left-handed. Presumably we had no ambidextrous people in the group. And so we take our survey, then we create a little matrix like this with the two variables, handedness and gender, and we see that we have roughly the same number of percentage of men and women that are right-handed, but when we kind of drill down to the left-handed side, we see that we have, significantly more left-handed males than females. Anyways, so this is an example of cross-tabulation. We're looking at these two variables, gender and handedness, and broken down into two components, male and female, right and left, and just looking at the stats. Okay, that's our example of cross-tabulation. And if you take a course in statistics, or if you've taken a course in statistics, you know that there's other methods for analyzing data as well. Much more sophisticated versions, methods. Okay, then the final stage of the marketing research process is drawing conclusions and writing reports. So we're going to, oops. Oh, oops, I'm going the wrong way. Okay, so it's drawing conclusions and writing reports. So we have to interpret the data, highlight the important results, and write our reports. Write a report. Okay, then finally in this section, the authors draw to our attention that there are some potential ethical issues in marketing research. So if the researchers don't report problems that they encounter during the research stage due to incomplete data, then maybe the results, the conclusions we draw aren't going to be very favorable or very accurate. And then another potential ethical problem is only reporting favorable results and kind of omitting some of the unfavorable data. And another potential issue is using deceptive means for collecting information. And a final potential ethical issue in marketing research is breaching respondent confidentiality. Okay, so the final section of chapter 8 here deals with some modern techniques, modern marketing research techniques. And this is really where we are today, and I suspect you might find this interesting. This is a section that kind of ties back to the marketing research conducted using data from social media. Okay, so really the section is about it's about using information technology to lead to marketing decisions and actions. So the usual marketing research process is the marketer identifies some potential factors that influence buying decisions, and then the marketing researcher goes out and collects the data to see if the connection between the two variables, the influencing variable and the purchase variable, can be verified. And we have two types of influences. We have controllable influences, otherwise known as the marketing mix. Otherwise known as the 4 Ps of marketing. So the marketer controls these variables, and then of course we know we have environmental factors, which are non-controllable factors. So both these types of factors can influence purchasing decisions. So marketers use information processing technology to collect and analyze data. So in the little illustration on the screen here we have the controllable factors. These are the controllable factors. They're controllable by the marketer, so these are the marketing mix, otherwise known as the 4 Ps. Variable, so the price, product, advertising, let's say that's promotion, and distribution refers to place, where is the product available. And then we also have some non-controllable factors. So for example, what the competition does. We don't control them, but yet they also have an influence on what we sell. If our competitors drop their price, if our competitors have special sales and reduce their price, then our sales are probably going to decrease. Okay, so marketers nowadays, when they're conducting marketing research, use extensive amounts of computer technology, and the technology is all kind of. Oh, did I go the right way? Sorry, went the wrong way. Oops. It's all sort of combined into a so-called marketing information system. And so we have a little bit of a diagram. It's kind of a schematic diagram of how this marketing information system looks. So you have, oops, wrong way, sorry. Okay, so we have the marketer research down here that has a computer that ties into a data warehouse, and the data warehouse links databases either containing information from internal data sources. So we have the vendor, they sell products to the customer, so they have electronic information about customer orders, customer data, inventory levels, sales calls, promotions, all that kind of stuff. They have all this internal data in their own internal data sources, in their internal databases. And then there's also external databases. They have information about the industry, they have information from trade associations, they have census data, and so on, and they can combine both sources of data together. And then you have the market researcher down here that uses computer programs to analyze this data. And so these data warehouses, these are when they connect these different databases, and then the researcher can troll through these databases looking for patterns. And one of the methods of looking for patterns in the data is known as sensitivity analysis. Maybe some of you have done this with Excel, but they're queries. So you're asking what kind of people buy which kind of products, how does demand change based on price, and so on. What's the effectiveness of our advertising? Okay, so the final little section here kind of comes back to conducting marketing research with social media. It indirectly relates to marketing research using data from social media, because the book makes mention of this concept known as data mining. So with data mining, companies have these databases of these huge volumes of information. I mean, if you're buying something online, all of your information is in electronic form to start with. And if you're a big store like Walmart or Sears or Amazon, you're collecting huge amounts of shopper information all the time. And the patterns between different variables might not be discernible to the human eye. And so researchers troll through the data looking for patterns that are not detectable by the human eye. And if they find these patterns, then maybe the researcher is able to use that information in their marketing actions. So an example of data mining from the book on page 227, there's an example of a supermarket that noticed that when men came in to the store shopping in the evening, they often bought beer and diapers in the same shopping trip. And so the store thought that, oh, okay, young men, young fathers, they're having to babysit, so they got to get diapers, got to get beer at the same time. So they tried to increase the sales of those two products by moving them physically closer together in the store. So that's just an example of data mining. So now I have an example of data mining based on data coming from social media. So I'm not really going to tell you what the example is. What I'm going to do is refer you to one of the videos that I've posted in Moodle. And the video is from an American professor. Her name is Jennifer Jennifer Goldbeck. And her video is called The Curly Fry Conundrum. So this video, if I recall correctly, I think it's about 9 minutes long, and you really only have to watch about the first 6 minutes or so. Anyways, she has an example of a large American department store that did some data mining on their clientele, and they discovered an interesting shopping pattern. And the interesting shopping pattern is based on vitamins and handbags. So if you're interested in seeing another interesting example of a marketing research engaging in data mining that drew a connection between vitamins and handbags, then watch the first few minutes of this video. Okay, so I have two final videos that I posted to Moodle that help explain how companies engage in data mining and how they look for patterns in these huge databases. And the next video, it's a very geeky fellow that the video is called explaining big data. The guy is a complete computer geek, but he does a very good job of explaining what big data is and how companies troll through it looking for patterns. And then finally, and this one, it doesn't relate directly to social media, but if you watch this video, you will intuit how companies are conducting marketing research using data coming from Facebook and Twitter and YouTube and all that kind of stuff. And the video is called IBM Watson, how it works. So you may be familiar with IBM's Watson. Watson is a supercomputer, how it works, built by IBM, and it's an exceedingly sophisticated computer because it's able to analyze data in ways that are relatively new. It's able to use relatively so-called unstructured data, and it's the unstructured data that's coming from the social media. When you click a little like button in Facebook, well, IBM and these market researchers, they're watching you there. And this professor, Jennifer Goldbeck, she also talks about doing marketing research using data from social media. So I think if you watch these three videos and you kind of connect some dots, you can get a good sense on where marketing research is today. Okay, so that's it for chapter 8. This is our second last chapter before the midterm exam, and we'll see you back in chapter 9. Oops.